for a very long time, and we're just seeing the end of stage two. Stage two is really still the command and control kind of leadership, where leaders acted very autonomously. They had the vision, they made the decision, you followed. And stage three, which we're just entering, just at the very beginning right now, stage three really is a period in which leaders connect their vision to your vision and to everybody else's vision. And they understand that you can't have the whole thing all at once. So they look for that little piece of their vision that connects to your vision and to my vision. And they try to look at the connections rather than the disconnects between them.
Do you see it happening more in the next, let me say, the inheritors? We're seeing the new king of Jordan, the new, he's not king, but the new president maybe of Syria. And we've seen it with North and South Korea that we never thought would ever get together.
Well, the king of Jordan, I think, is really working and walking in his father's footsteps, because his father actually became a connective leader in the last stages of his life, where he reached out to former enemies, which is one of the hallmarks of connective leadership. The ability to reach out to somebody with whom you have disagreed, somebody whom you have or your predecessors have defined as the enemy, and find friendship and find common cause. So I think his son is really walking in his father's footsteps. In the other cases, I think they're beginning to understand that they can't get anywhere if they don't change, if they don't act in a more connected way. Living in your own world with a bubble over you and not recognizing that you are inevitably influenced by everybody else's needs and agendas simply won't work. And I think what you're seeing with the two Koreas is that they are coming together out of necessity, not because they love each other, but because they see the need to connect. And that's what connective leadership is about.
But Jean, how do you handle connective leadership with the American public when you have Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other, in, say, a presidential campaign, where the other side has become the enemy? I mean, it's not as if we're really discoursing on ideas as much as I'm good, you're bad. I mean, there's the black and white of political parties.
I think that's one of both the tragedies and the strengths, in a funny sense, of democracy. That we, on the one hand, when you have a two-party system, you're pushed into this this diversity, this very sharply outlined difference between the two parties. On the other hand, they can come together because there oftentimes are not serious differences between the two. In fact, most of the pundits, when they describe the current candidates, they say, well, there isn't that much difference between them, and there isn't. So they exaggerate the differences between them so they can appeal to their own constituencies. But what each of those candidates really is trying to do is to reach out to all of the same constituencies, all these diverse groups. And so their message inevitably becomes quite similar.
Americans have an ambivalence towards leadership, the hero?
Oh, I think so. I think that that's really part of what democracy is all about, that we don't believe that anybody is really that much better than anybody else. And so therefore, they are willing to let somebody take a shot at leadership, but not monopolize it. And that was a very Jeffersonian idea. Jefferson's idea was that people would go to Washington in the Congress for a short period of time and then return to their own local communities and take their leadership skills and apply them there. And so I think that's very fundamental to the American way of looking at leadership. They don't look for kings.
You say in the book, though, success brings more success. But then that, with their connective leadership, does have a problem when you get into industry and antitrust laws such as Microsoft, or even in New York, Alliance Insurance. All of these mergers and acquisitions, success does bring success, but where's the connective leadership there?
Well, I think Microsoft is a marvelous example because Microsoft didn't understand connective leadership, and they felt they had to act as if they were in stage 2. They had to compete, they had to kill off the competition. And they only very late in the game began to see that what they really needed to do was to create alliances, to connect with their competitors, to make them, to turn them into collaborators instead of competitors. And they learned that perhaps too late. And that, I think, is a real tragedy.
Cisco Industries, have they been wiser?
Well, I can't really comment as much on that. What they are trying to do, and I think this is really clever, they are trying to learn from Microsoft's mistakes.
Yeah.
And that, I teach a course in crisis management. We always try to say, learn from other people's crises. Don't wait for your own to happen. And so they're trying not to make the mistakes that Microsoft made.
We should say, Dr. Lipman-Blumen, that you are with the Leadership Institute at the Peter F. Drucker Graduate School of Management, Claremont Graduate University, and you are the Thornton F. Bradshaw Professor of Public Policy and Professor of Management. Thornton Bradshaw, is he still alive today?
No, unfortunately he died. He was quite a connective leader in his own
At
right.
NBC, wasn't it?
Yes. And he was quite a spectacular person, and the chair I hold honors him.
Uh-huh. Did he donate it?
No, Arco did when he was leaving the CEO-ship of Arco. They donated it in his honor when he was going to New York.
So here we have another hero out of industry.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of heroes from industry, but the kinds of people who will emerge as the truly successful heroes of industry in the coming decades will be a very different brand than we've had in the past. I do believe, and we're beginning to see some of these people right now, people who understand that they need to create alliances, they need to create groups or coalitions that don't have to last forever, that work on a particular problem here and now, and they don't have to march in lockstep with one another forever. They work on something and then they split apart, and then the leader calls some of those people together and brings still other parties into the act. NATO was the perfect stage 2 coalition. It lasted for more than 40 years. And now it's changed. And one of the difficulties with NATO was that everybody was expected to follow the leader. The member that had the most in the way of resources, financial, military, political resources. And you had to march according to that drummer. And coalitions today are very different. Let me give you an example. When President Clinton called his first economic summit, and I believe that took place after the election but before he was actually inaugurated, the media were astounded because he brought people and parties and constituents from many, many different groups. There were Republicans, there were Democrats, there were conservative economists, there were less conservative economists. And the press said, fantastic, great, a perfectly marvelous summit, economic summit. And then they said, but will he be able to keep this together for the rest of his term? And my first thought was, wrong, that's the wrong question, because they are not necessarily the right people, the right representatives for the issues that he has to deal with over time. They're not, some of those people, but not all of them, could help on health care. But you need to bring in a whole other group of people to work on that issue. You need to bring in some of them, perhaps, but still others to work on environment. And the connective leader understands something that stage 2 leaders didn't, and that is that when they call somebody who has worked in Coalition 1, and that person says, that's not my issue, I really disagree with you on this issue, I can't work with you on it, stage 2 leaders would see that person as an enemy and read them out of the, out of the group. A connective leader says, fine, don't worry about it. We'll work together later on something else. And they do. And they know how to maintain those relationships. They know how to create networks. They know how to negotiate. They know how to be mentors. They know how to entrust their vision to you or to me.
Are people who attend business schools or government schools learning this skill?
I think more and more they are. They certainly are at the Peter Drucker Graduate School of Management. And this book is now being used in universities, not only in the U.S., but all over the world.
I was intrigued to hear how successful it is in Asia, in the Orient.
Not only there, but for me, one of the most interesting and surprising places where it's being used is in Novosibirsk, Siberia, in Russia, where they have put together and created a Connective Leadership Institute where they are teaching women and men in Siberia to be connective leaders, because they feel Russia needs people who can reach out to all the different diverse groups within Russia and help them to work interdependently, because that's what it's about. It's taking people and groups with different needs, different agendas, but who are locked in by necessity into an interdependence.
Has it been used, say, in Ireland, which has the ongoing conflict with the Protestant Catholics?
Well, it's funny you should mention Ireland, because I just got an email from somebody in Ireland who wants to use it not with the political people, but with the banks of Ireland. So it's being used in political circles, it's being used in organizations and corporations, and in not-for-profit organizations.
You talked too about what do you mean by instrumental styles?
Well, the instrumental styles are perhaps the most interesting, the most difficult for Americans to deal with, but the most necessary for them to learn, because they're the styles that have to do with using yourself to attract other people to your cause, that deal with creating networks and putting people in touch with one another, and being in touch yourself with a whole host of people, and more than that, entrusting your tasks to others. It's what I call denatured Machiavellianism. It's using all the political savvy of a Machiavelli, but with a very, very big difference. And the difference is that you use it ethically and you use it overtly, so that people know that you want something from them. You want to use them, but it's for a cause you both believe in. It's not for the leader's power or glory, but it's to accomplish something that both you and the leader think is important. And that's a very big difference.
And talking about connective leadership, building collaborative arrangements for the long term. And you used Dianne Feinstein as an example when she was mayor, collaborating with people to do a long-term on, Candlestick Park, so that she was no longer connected with San Francisco at the time, other than being senator. When the earthquake came, that Candlestick Park there were very few lives were lost.
Well, I think that Dianne Feinstein, in that instance, I think was an exemplary leader, in that she was not thinking about her own political future, because she could have used that money or urged people to use the money for much more directly political causes that would have helped her and made her look very good. She put the money into Candlestick Park to make sure that in any future earthquake, and one might not come for 50 years, of that magnitude at least, that people would be safe. And so she was authentic. And what I mean by authentic was she was dedicated to the good of the community. And she acted for the good of the community, not for herself. And that authenticity is a hallmark of connective leaders. So is accountability.
Yeah. And commitment.
Absolutely. Well, commitment is part of authenticity. It means your commitment is there, and it's consistent, and it's not to yourself. It's to the group. It's to what the group is trying to accomplish.
The group is subliminally tuned into that authenticity. I mean, they're tuned in that you know when somebody's a hypocrite.
Absolutely. You feel it. No one has to tell you. It's something you just know. It's like the Supreme Court Justice's definition of obscenity. He said, I don't know how to define it. I don't have a good definition of it, but I certainly know it, when I hear it, when I see it.
Connective leadership, in a way, has been more of a feminine quality, it seems to me, that women have known that they had to work together. Men have been more of general, 4-star general, as opposed to the woman who needed to work with the Red Cross and get the group together.
I think that's very true. And one of the ironies of this is that as women come into the workforce, and in this book, we studied 5,000 men and women in American corporations. And we thought that we would see that kind of a difference between male and female senior managers. And the interesting, and I thought rather sad finding, was that many of these women were acting like men from stage 2, but the men, the most senior leaders in corporate America, are acting much more the way women used to act. They are being collaborative. They're being mentors. They contribute to other people's success behind the scenes. They don't always have to be the one who is commanding and controlling. And I think that it's rather dangerous for women to look to the old models of men. They should look in the mirror and discover that some of the things that they had to learn in order to survive, to do things through relationships, to do things through networks, through friendships, through building these networks.
You used Marcy Carsey and Lillian Gallo as women within the entertainment industry, and there is a new book out called Is That a Gun in Your Pocket, referring to Sherry Lansing and something that happened with Paramount and the Titanic film, cost sharing. I mean, almost because of economics, they have been forced to become connective on a cost basis.
Yes, but I think that Marcy Carsey, who is one of the people, as you mentioned, whom I interviewed in the book, there are many interviews in the book with people from the public sector, from the private sector, from the U.S., from abroad. Marcy Carsey, I think, was a connective leader ahead of her time.
Yeah. For those who may not know, Marcy Carsey and her partner have been the producers of The Bill Cosby Show, Roseanne, and
Third Rock from the Sun.
Third Rock from the Sun, and they also, didn't they buy a baseball team, or her partner did, down in San Diego?
That's so.
And she now, with Oprah Winfrey, has the network Oxygen.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And what's really quite marvelous, I think, about Marcy Carsey, she's what I think of really as a connective leader or a stage 3 leader. She isn't hung up on feeling that she has to call all the shots. She gives it over to somebody else. And this has a marvelous effect on creativity. And it's absolutely crucial. Creativity is important, not just in the entertainment business, but everywhere. We will not survive as a nation without creativity and innovation. But when you hand your task, your vision, over to somebody else and say, here, do it. Do it any way you want. Don't try to get into my head and figure out the way to do it. Do it your way. You free people up to reach inside themselves and find gifts and creativity that they never knew they had.
How does that function, say, at the Peter Drucker Institute?
Well, I think we try very hard to give our students opportunities to explore their own strengths, to realize that they have creativity, they have knowledge, they have experiences that they can bring together in a very special way to approach problems that I knew. We have problems today that are not simply variations on what our grandparents experienced. We are experiencing things that didn't exist before. The internet that you mentioned at the beginning of this program is a perfect example. How do you operate on the internet? I have a student who has graduated from the Drucker Institute, from the Drucker School, who now lives in Israel. And he puts together groups that are virtual groups through the internet, and he is the manager, the leader of these people. And he knows how to use what he's learned at the Drucker School to bring together these people who are very diverse